Help. And how we repeat it. The brainwashing of people. We're hypnotized. Topics include chaos, a Plato, an allegory of the cave, Montauk Project, Mandela Effect, the problem with using labels, and other topics that are considered conspiracy theories.
Welcome everyone to Back to Light. Oh, it's getting juicy now. Do you see everything is all interconnected? Stay with us. It gets good.
Article 3. The Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect is a psychological phenomenon where large groups of people believe in a false memory. It is named after South African leader Nelson Mandela, who, according to the masses, died in prison in 1981. He in fact died a free man in 2013. What causes this phenomenon of false group memory? In the classic movie Casablanca, the most famous misquoted one-liner is, "Play it again, Sam," supposedly said by actor Humphrey Bogart. The actual line is, "Play it." Ingrid Bergman, his co-star, also says "Play it, Sam," albeit almost no one remembers her saying it. Do you remember Mickey Mouse having suspenders? Many claim to have seen the Steamboat episode where he pulls them back and snaps them while it's whistling. There is no picture or film of Mickey ever wearing suspenders. Neuroscience explains it as the memory being stored in the area of the brain that connects to other similar events, and these neurons get activated together. Additionally, where there are gaps, the memory fills in information to make sense of the events, at times with incorrect details. There may also be misleading information post-event, such as unreliable eyewitness reports. Quantum physics presents the possibility of alternative realities. The Internet also has some level of culpability in this digital age phenomenon. At times, entire groups congregate around falsehoods, feeding the narrative that it was, in fact, a real event. Sound familiar?
Who is this person? There is Elvis Presley, and there never was. This rock and roll icon's name is actually Elvis Presley. Of course that's true. His name is Elvis Presley. Earth-shattering feeling you just is what some affect. And you're gonna walk.
What if some of your memories aren't real? Not just yours, but millions of people. Neuroscience. Reconstruction. Every time memories are stored in networks, and when created, others that are similar light up with it. Sometimes they blend together. Sometimes they fill in gaps. And sometimes they create details that were never there. Think about that. Your brain is constantly trying to make sense of the world, even if that means possibly adding pieces that don't belong. Now let's bring that into real life. Let's think about the last few years. How often did information change? How often did the narrative shift? One day something was true, the next day it wasn't. We were told where to stand, how far apart to be, what was safe, what wasn't, and over time, those experiences became memories, shared memories, but not always consistent ones. So now ask yourself, how much of what we remember is actually what happened? And now add another layer, the internet and the news. When people share the same memory, they validate each other. I remember that too. See, I'm not crazy. That's how it was. And suddenly, a false memory becomes a shared truth. We had entire groups forming around it, videos, forums, comment sections, all reinforcing the same idea, until it felt real, undeniably. And this is where it gets interesting, because now we're no longer just talking about memory, we're talking about perception. What happens when enough people believe something, even if it isn't true? Does it become real in a different way? And some people go even further. They suggest alternate timelines, parallel realities. The idea that maybe we're remembering something that didn't exist. Well, maybe not in this realm, but in a different reality, we're remembering that, and we shifted. Now, whether you believe that or not, it raises an important question. How stable is reality, really? Going back to our last article, remember Plato once described a group of people sitting in a cave, watching the shadows on the wall, believing those shadows were reality. Today, we don't just see shadows, we remember them, we build identities around them, and we defend them. Think about how powerful that is. If memory can be influenced, if perception can be shaped, if entire groups can share something that never happened, the question isn't just, was it real? The question becomes, who or what is shaping what we believe is real? Because once you realize that, you start to see things differently. You question more, you observe more, you become aware of how easily perception can be guided. The Mandela Effect isn't just a curiosity, it's a window, a glimpse into how fragile memory can be, and how powerful influence really is. And maybe, just maybe, it's another step out of the cave and into the light of truth. Before we go any further, take a moment and think of something that you were sure about, and later found out you were wrong. Now imagine that on a scale worldwide. Now at this point, it would be easy to say, well, people just remembered it wrong. But that doesn't sit right, does it? Remembering them vaguely, they remember them vividly, and they have proof. Think about Halloween, all the costumes, conversations, and shared cultural moments. People remember dressing up based on what they believed they saw. So the question becomes, how do so many people remember something with that level of clarity? I can remember Tom Cruise's costume was a white button-down shirt, sunglasses, socks. How did the stores that were selling it get it wrong? Wouldn't they have a reference point of what was correct? What about the exercise dude? Richard Simmons. We all wore a sweatband. We remember the look, the style, his energy. And whether or not that exact detail is accurate, the image to us became real in our time. These images were referenced over and over and over again. They were even on Saturday Night Live, which was a very popular show when we were growing up, that did parodies. So now, we're not just dealing with memory, we're dealing with reinforcement. How does an image evolve? It appears once, then it gets copied, then exaggerated, then simplified, until it becomes the version everyone recognizes. Not the original, but the most repeated. Because when enough people share the same version of something, it stops feeling like a mistake and starts feeling like the real reality. And this brings us back to the deeper question. If memory can be shaped, not just individually, but collectively, then how much of what we know is built in the same way?
Marvel Cinematic Universe, the many worlds interpretation theory was developed in the mid-20th century and basically states there are many worlds which exist parallel to our own in space and time. The theory was originally developed by Erwin Schrödinger as a way to explain a phenomenon in quantum physics and purports that there are no alternative outcomes to events. All outcomes happen simultaneously. In 1955, Hugh Everett, a then PhD student, introduced the idea of the universe, quote, splitting into alternate versions of itself when faced with a quantum choice. Each possible outcome of a choice creates a new universe, and these universes are identical up until the moment where the event is triggered. It might go without saying, but just in case, quantum physicists in the 1950s developed the many worlds interpretation theory to explain experiments in quantum physics, and not the Mandela Effect. But by this logic, both timelines, the one where Mandela died in prison and the one where he lived until 2013, exist, but in separate realities. Those who remember one reality but find it didn't actually happen are not misremembering. They may have lived in one universe and somehow switched into another, or reality itself has shifted. But since there's no Doctor Strange or Green Guy in the real world, how and why might our realities be shifting so wildly?
There's a very specific feeling. The feeling of being right. You felt it before. When you remember something clearly, when you can picture it, almost relive it, there's no hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. But what if that feeling doesn't mean what we think it means? Because this isn't about small mistakes. This is about shared memories, cultural moments, images, details, things people just didn't see, but experienced. They have C's, S's, and steps. So instead of dismissing that, let's take it seriously. Because when large groups of people remember the same thing with that level of clarity, something is happening. And it's not random. It shows up in very specific ways. Logos, branding, famous from movies, cultural icons. Things that were seen over and over and over again, repeated, recognized instantly, embedded over time. So the question becomes, why these things? Let's bring this into something more concrete, because most people don't notice this until they're shown an example. And when they are, the reaction is almost the same. Not confusion, but certainty. Let's look at Fruit of the Loom, for example. Many people remember the logo with fruit and a cornucopia, a horn-shaped basket, something that gives the image structure, not just fruit floating, but arranged, contained, recognizable. And for many, that memory is clear. But when they look now, they're told it was never there. Now let's take something simple, a product used every day. Febreze. How do you remember it being spelled? Was it one E or two? A different rhythm, a different look. And yet, the current version says otherwise. Then there are lines we all know. Luke, I am your father. A line repeated for decades. That's not the word now. It's the version almost everyone recognizes.
I'm of course aware of the famous Star Wars Mandela Effect, and it's one of the biggest out there.
No, I am your father. Luke, I am your father.
Luke, I am your father.
Luke, I am your father.
Luke, I am your father.
Hey, what do you want? This is CNN or Luke, I'm your father?
No, I am your father.
And it doesn't stop there. Some remember the Bernstein Bears. instead of the Bernstein Bears. I think we would remember that properly, don't you? How about this one? Mirror, mirror on the wall. Nope, now it's magic mirror on the wall. And some remember objects, logos, and small details, just slightly different, but consistently. For me personally, I remember the old list, and that was something that I found fascinating as well. It's not that you remember some of them, I'm going to call it then and now, right? It's not like some are remembered as then and some are remembered as now. It's if you remember then, the entire list is then. And I'm kind of tired of these newer generations saying, nope, that's just the way it always was. For you, because this is your reference point. This is where you were able to get your data from. When this unbrainwashing article was presented in the chat, it created a lot of chatter. Most of our community remembers the old list. What do you remember? So now we step back. These aren't random mistakes. They evolve. Things that were seen often, repeated often, recognized instantly, things that became familiar. And when things are familiar, it's powerful. Because once something feels familiar, it feels true. There's something else that makes this harder to ignore. It's not that people are remembering things differently. It's how they remember them. When someone recalls one of these, they don't just remember it halfway. They don't mix versions. They remember the whole thing the same way, consistently. And that raises a bigger question. Why would entire groups of people remember something the same way if it were random? We know that the mind stores patterns, not just details, but meaning, connections. So when something is recalled, it comes back as a complete version, not fragmented, but whole. Now add in repetition. These weren't seen once. They were seen again and again and again, in stores, on screens, in conversations. And repetition builds familiarity. And over time, that builds certainty. Speaking of time, let's look at that. There's an entire generation before everything was digital, before instant gratification, back when memories were actually the record. Experience was the proof, and what was seen was trusted. Now, compare that to today, where everything is searchable in an instant, where the current version is always available. So, different generations start from different reference points. So now the question shifts. Not, are we wrong, but why do so many people remember the same version? And why does it feel so certain? Let's take the infamous album cover. You know, the bandana versus the hat. It's not just fabric, but meaning, identity, expression, signal. The color meant something, placement meant something. These things weren't random. They carried significance. So when people remember a bandana, they're remembering more than an image. They're remembering the meaning. Now, let's take a look at things that we remember as true, but somehow it is either changed on the internet or scrubbed from the internet. We had a whole conversation about this when we first started doing these unbrainwashings, and it was awesome. We were talking about Bruce Springsteen. Do you remember? No, what do you remember? Let me not fill it in for you. What do you remember? Take a moment. Imagine him on stage or looking at that album cover. What do you remember being in his back pocket? Yeah. No, they're saying it was a red ball cap. First off, I don't even think that putting a hat in your back pocket would be comfortable. So then I started to dig. Now, I'm not going to get into all the particulars, but you can do some research for yourself. However, I started to look at colors. It's always been something I'm interested in colors, I'm interested in numbers and connections. And if you start to look into what these colors meant in the back of people's pants, it would blow your mind. And it doesn't surprise me with all of the knowledge and declassification that's been coming out that something like that would want to be hidden because, you know, symbolism is their downfall. And if you're like me, a pattern recognition specialist, I started to think, why would they bring so much attention to this? What does it matter what was in the back pocket? Switching from a bandana to a hat. Which led me down a rabbit hole I'm not sure anybody's ready to hear. You see what these things meant at that time. This is what it was used for in certain communities. The color mattered, as well as the placement. Do you remember what pocket the quote-unquote bandana was in? With all the hype in the news right now with the Epstein files, it's no wonder they wanted to separate that image from that man. So, okay, we have the bandana and all of its meanings. But then I'm like, well, why a red hat? So you zoom in, and I was able to find a logo on the hat. Now they're saying this was something that was given to him by his father, and it holds all this symbolic stuff for family. First off, I don't know. Have you ever put a hat in your back pocket? It's not very easy, one. And two, it's not very comfortable. So I don't know why he would have a hat in his back pocket. And I spoke to a bunch of guys as well from that time, and no one ever put a hat in their back pocket. But if you ask the younger generations, that's all they've ever known. Not saying if I'm correct or not, I'm just stating an opinion. But this is another way of divide and conquer. The younger generations versus the older generations. So let's get back to the hat. And whether that's how it always was or something that feels different, the focus changed. And once attention shifts, questions follow. What is it? Where did it come from? Why that detail? And when people look deeper, they begin to find connections, like I did. The logo you see here on screen, if you put it in a reverse Google search, led me to something very interesting. It showed a REMBAS logo, so I looked it up. And what I found was it stands for Remotely Monitored Battlefield Sensor System. Yep, you heard that right. In the U.S., I'm going to read this from the good old Google. U.S. Army Unattended Ground Sensor System designed to detect, classify, and report on personal and vehicle activity. It uses passive, seismic, acoustic, infrared, and magnetic sensors to provide real-time intelligence with improved versions, offering higher reliability and reduced size. It was a U.S. Army project led by the RCA in Camden, New Jersey. Now, I'm not going to get all conspiracy theory on you, but we have been led by breadcrumbs where future proves past. So I was wondering, why the focus on this? What does it matter? Why was the focus on the hat so significant? And who knows where it came from? What the specifics of it was? All I know is that if you try to shove a hat in your back pocket, it's not going to be comfortable. Like I said before, I don't even see how it would fit, and people are all online debating on how it could even be done. As far as I can tell, this affected an entire generation. Most of us remember the bandana. So it got me thinking, okay, what did this start to do? Well, it got people looking, didn't it? And they begin to find connections, like I did. References, discussions, interpretations. It's actually linked to the Vietnam era, which is crazy. So whether that is an actual connection or just a coincidence, whatever it is, the detail led somewhere. It pulled attention, piqued curiosity, and opened a door. Because sometimes it's not about the object, it's about where it leads. A small detail shifts, and people notice it. And suddenly, they're looking deeper, researching, following something they may have never looked at before. People don't just bring memory. They bring what they believe is evidence. Old items, images, recordings, things they've seen, things they've owned. And when those things don't seem to match what's accepted now, that's when tension begins. They start to search for validation. So they go to the internet, and what appears becomes the reference. But we don't see everything. We see what's available, what's preserved, what's repeated. It's called an algorithm. Then we have visibility versus truth. And visibility can feel like truth. If something appears everywhere, it feels real. If it doesn't, it feels like it never existed or it's been erased. But those aren't the same things. Over time, things change. They're repeated, recreated, simplified, until what remains is the most familiar version. And familiarity feels like truth. And when enough people start noticing the same things, asking the same questions, it begins to feel like something more. Like a shift in awareness. Because either way, this reveals something deeper about memory and perception, about how reality is experienced and understood. We don't interact with reality directly. We interact with our perception of it. And that perception is shaped by memory, repetition, experience, by what we're shown and what we're not. And maybe this was never just about logos or lines or small details being off. Maybe it's something bigger, a moment where enough people begin to see differently. Some call it coincidence, some call it curiosity, and some call it the Great Awakening.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. And thank our producer, Carrie, our moderator and writer, Claudia, and our songwriter, Todd. Couldn't do it without y'all. And of course, you, the audience, who tunes in weekly, who are open and willing to fight against that cognitive dissonance. We see you. Keep shining your light. You'll get there. Much love, everyone.
Only after the truth has come about, it walks into the room with lies thrown throughout. Can the minds of the sleeping and lying about awake from their slumber to stumble on out of the mind control that has placed them inside rooms of deception the human brain provides. No place for logic in these darkened rooms. Common sense lost within the vacuum of construes, leaving no hope for rescue in this lying state. Rooms piling high with just more of the same. Less of course the light of truth, like the break of day, finds its way through the keyhole of night, unlocking the way, opening the door for the dawning to be saved. That's what we do in this awakening and calling, locating room service for the mind.
So on the screen,